everybody. Welcome to the world's greatest Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I'm your co-host, Mike L, and as always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be taking a look at Spidey comics from April of 1989.
Yes, and we are joined by Bex Luthor.
Hello, I am here, and it is hot out, and I'm dying.
The world is on fire.
Can't wait to read this Christmas issue of Spider-Man.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've had 50 years of warning. We've done nothing about it. Let the roads melt. We're fine. Okay. Anyway. I'm sure it's a coincidence. But anyway. Okay, we have a very special guest this week. She was hesitant to come on, but I encouraged her anyway. Actually, I forced her at gunpoint. Everybody welcome Lisa, our pal Lisa.
Hey, guys.
We need a superhero name for you, Lisa.
Yeah, go for it.
What's your favorite superhero? Do you have any?
Yeah, no, you pick. You're the expert.
We'll think of something.
Think of something.
So here's the thing. We should mention, and we won't say your last name because we don't want anyone to know, but you are a teacher.
Yes.
In the Windsor, Essex area.
Yes.
And what do you teach?
I teach English, and I teach grade 12. So they're pretty much adults. They look like adults, but do they act like adults? Not so much. So it's kind of that weird, awkward stage. So yeah, that's my perpetual assignment in life, because then I come home and I have kids the same age. So I can't escape.
And then you do a podcast with 40-year-olds talking about Spider-Man. So it all works out, right? Yeah.
Full circle.
Yeah.
Full circle.
All of us stopped aging at 16 anyway, so.
Yeah.
Right.
So just to be clear, so everyone knows, you technically never read, or you've read some graphic novels, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've read Jeff Lemire?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Essex County, Sweet Tooth. I'm trying to incorporate graphic novels into our curriculum at school, just because, the literary canon tends to be around for 500 years, and it's time to update. So I kind of do a lot of graphic novels, YA, looking for top quality stuff to incorporate into my class. And that being said, comic books is another thing, another genre that I would like to incorporate somehow, somewhere, some way. And actually, this week has been eye-opening with these 3 issues that, we're going to be talking about. And yeah, I think the kids would love this stuff.
So
maybe not these specific ones.
Maybe not these comics. Eye-opening of
we
what
have a
not
lot to
to
talk
pick.
about.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, these are 1980s superhero comics. They're, to be fair, they're commercially produced. They were not, the people making these didn't think they were making art. Maybe some of them are artistic by accident, which we'll talk about, but this is certainly done for entertainment. It's done for a younger audience, but that doesn't mean that we don't enjoy them, and I definitely enjoyed them when I was a kid and blah, blah, blah. But we are going to talk about these.
Right.
And should we lay down the law on these guys now, Lisa? Should we tell them what your system is? Should we brag about your system that you've...
My system? Well, I don't know if I would call it a system. But, guys, let's be honest here. I am an English teacher, and whenever I assign students any type of reading, I encourage annotation, right? You have to annotate things to remember things. So should I show them? I have it here. I'm kind of embarrassed, though.
Don't be embarrassed.
Okay, well, I just kind of converted the comic books into PDF form, and then I just annotate everything.
That's amazing.
So,
yes.
Well, I don't know if I'd say amazing, but...
she has notes on every page.
I've got to say, I definitely started sweating because I had that same feeling of forgetting to do my homework before the assignment is due the next day, and like oh my god, what do you mean annotations? I don't have anything.
Well, guess what?
Annotation. It's like a fancy word that means circle something that's funny and you want to talk about. That's annotation. Anything that stands out, circle it. Write a comment so you don't forget. Yeah. That's annotation.
But
I remember when we first started, probably for the first 50 episodes, I had a notebook and I would fill it with notes.
Yep.
Every single week. And then after the 50th episode, I'm like, I cannot do this again. I can't do this every week.
Right.
I just can't.
Well, guess what, guys?
Goals.
I was going to say, going forward, Becca and Josh, I'll expect you to have annotations for all of your reviews. Okay?
Dude, sometimes I don't even read the book, okay? Like, what do you want from me?
Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay. So, we are going to talk about Web of Spider-Man.
Right.
Oh, really quickly, before we jump into this, Lisa, what is your familiarity with Spider-Man?
Not much. I mean, I saw the original movie going way back, and that's about it. And I know he does something like, right, with the Spidey, the web thing, like that.
Right.
And that's it, guys.
Whip. Well, you know what? That's fair. That's fair.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I was never exposed to comic books, but I think if I would have been exposed to comic books at a younger age, I can see the appeal. I kind of enjoyed this. I think they're fun.
All right. Okay, so here we go. It's 1989, and, kids everywhere are picking up Spidey because they love Spidey. They love his costume. And here we go. We're going to read a story aimed at kids. But before we jump into the story, we got to talk about this cover, because the cover is by a guy named Charles Vess. It's a different artist than did the interior. So this is kind of like no relation to the story. I think this cover is beautiful. Lisa, I want to know your first impression of this cover. What do you think of it?
Yeah. So we're talking about like the corner business one, right?
Right, exactly.
I have it here, guys.
Woo, look at that.
Yeah. I mean, okay, I really liked it. Like aesthetically, it's great. It's Web of Spider-Man. And again, coming from a non-comic person, so now I'm figuring out that there's different, would you call it series or different strands of Spider-Man? I had no idea. Yeah, I had no idea. So as I'm looking at this, I'm like, this is really cool. And I think it's the perfect cover to kind of, advertise what's on the inside.
Yeah, to be fair, it's actually one of those covers that it kind of could fit almost any story, because it's just Spider-Man on a roof kind of climbing around. So you could argue that it doesn't fit the story, but it's a beautiful image and it makes you want to buy the comic.
Yeah.
And Charles Vess, known more for doing other things later on, like Sandman and things like that, and his own stuff. Josh, were you going to say something?
It doesn't necessarily... what is happening doesn't necessarily tell a story of what you're going to get in the issue, but I feel like the art style does, and the sketchiness of it, and it feels more like grounded.
Right.
So it definitely fits, I find, with like the very serious story that happens in this issue. I don't think there's really any jokes. If there are, they're like small. Right. Small jokes. So it is definitely a serious issue that's trying to say something and take itself seriously. So I think that the tone of the cover definitely matches, but you're right. It could be kind of like for any
Spidey story.
Any story, yeah.
Okay, so Josh, you're gonna tell us what happens in this one, right?
Right. So if I remember correctly, we start with like a flash forward. We're seeing like an event that's going to happen. So we see this guy on the street corner. We see a kid walk up to him, and we see that he's going there to buy drugs from this guy. And Spidey comes in, webs up the drug dealer, and throws all of his drugs up in the air and throws them on the street, tells the kid to scram, webs up the guy, takes his photograph that he's got pinned up to a wall, taking pictures of him, and then we kind of flash back to, like, I guess earlier that day or like before. I don't know. It's weird. It doesn't actually say that it flashes back, but that's what I felt.
To be honest, I didn't get that vibe at all. I thought it was completely chronological. Yeah,
because he said I think it's something he says that something like, I didn't realize what my day had in store for me, or something like that.
Yeah, but I think what it is that was like the morning, and now we cut to Mary Jane, and this is now like just like later an hour later. Yeah,
gotcha. Okay.
That's the way I see it. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I just misread something too, and I
interpreted it as well as a flashback in my annotations.
Okay.
That's what I
missed something.
That's what I marked. Flashback.
Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't like actually say anywhere, but I think that in his narration in his head, he says something that makes me think that it's like almost like he's telling this little bit of the story first and then going, I didn't think my day would kind of end up this way, but this is how it all started. And then we start with MJ.
Yeah, that's what he says. He says, it's what you did to my wife, Mary Jane, and to her friend. And then all of a sudden, the next panel is Mary Jane and the friend Lorraine.
Right, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So we see MJ. She's like walking down the street, and she sees her friend Lorraine across the street. She runs over. They catch up. She's walking with this guy, Winston Shepherd, and they're like just friends. They kind of like brush it off or whatever. MJ and Lorraine go back to her apartment, and they're like catching up. And MJ notes that like something is off. Like how are you like so busy but stay so energetic? And then Lorraine kind of like just flat out says, "I take speed." And MJ obviously thinks this is a joke. So she kind of laughs it off. Lorraine says, "I'll be right back." She goes to the bathroom. MJ is kind of waiting there. And then we hear a crash, and we see MJ burst into the bathroom and help her friend Lorraine up off the ground. And she ends up calling she calls the Daily Bugle looking for Peter, who is looking for work with Kate Cushing, which MJ kind of like jokingly calls her the Ice Queen to her face, not knowing that it's Kate. So Pete's able to run off. They start talking to Lorraine, and then she kind of tells the story about what's been going on with a drug dealer. And then Spidey's like, you know what? I haven't been able to get any jobs at the Bugle, so I'm going to take this as an opportunity to track this guy down, follow him, take pictures of him dealing drugs, and then bust him as Spider-Man. So he kind of spins this to Kate Cushing as like a mission that he's going to go on almost with Spider-Man, and the Peter Parker and Spider-Man are going to almost team up to stop this guy. Peter is going to take pictures, and Spider-Man is going to end up webbing the guy up at the end. So we kind of follow Spidey as he tracks this guy down at first. He ends up getting away in the subway, so Spidey loses him. All while MJ's taking her friend to different rehab facilities, and they're all full because the drug problem at the time in New York was so bad that all of the rehab places were full or like super expensive. So the whole book is kind of like almost like montagey, where Spidey is after the drug dealer, and the drug dealer is kind of like weaseling his way out of there. MJ is taking her friend to different facilities, and they're all booked up. And this kind of happens a couple of times until it all kind of comes to a head when the drug dealer goes to like the boss, like the headquarters of where they're making these drugs, and Spidey tracks them down, and the like head honcho in charge of this ends up killing him because he led Spider-Man to their base. Spidey's able to kind of like web them all up, take pictures, and like run this story. And he's unable to save the guy that was the drug dealer, so he does die. And it kind of leaves on this like bittersweet moment where Peter's like giving this assignment into Kate Cushing. It's going to be like a really good assignment. He's going to be up for like awards probably for it, but he's left with this like guilt of not being able to save these people. And like they were people doing bad things, but it still sucks when bad things happen to them and you can't save them. You can't like help rehabilitate them. And then
and then that's it.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, what happened? I can't remember. What happens with her friend?
Her friend overdoses and is in the hospital.
Right.
It's to the point where I think that originally she might have actually died, and they just rewrote the dialogue to be like, "Oh, she's in a coma," or something.
Yeah.
Her parents are coming too.
Right, and I think MJ also says something like, "At least she's in a place where she can't continue to use, and they'll hopefully be able to help her get off of it. And then we kind of see this like end page where MJ and Peter are walking away, kind of this melancholy type of moment. They talk about how they're, it kind of sucks, but Spider-Man and Peter did the right thing and got at least one person off the street, so that'll help like slowly take it down. And then we see a cab pull up past MJ and Peter, and then a guy steps out and he's flicking a coin on the street corner, just like we see at the beginning of the issue with the original guy. So we kind of see that this cycle is just going to keep continuing, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a very serious issue. I think it's the best we've ever seen on the podcast of like dealing with these serious topics. Mm-hmm. We've had a couple of like drug issues or smoking issues before, and they've all been like very PSA, like kid preachy. This one definitely takes itself more seriously. I feel like there's less of a story maybe going on with Spider-Man throughout, with like stopping the guy. It would have been kind of like maybe a little bit more interesting to see how he tracked him down and what he did, and maybe like talking to the guy more and trying to reason with him to stop or something. But all in all, I think it did a pretty okay job telling this story.
Well, I'll just say quickly, this is written by Peter David. This is his last issue of Spider-Man for regular, like Peter Parker Spider-Man, for like 10 years.
Wow.
He's been writing Spider-Man since the death of Gwen Stacy, that storyline. And I thought this issue was really good. The dialogue's great as usual. It is unusual during this period of Spider-Man for them to deal with like a serious topic like this, but I think they did handle it well. And this story has always stood out to me. I just always remembered, especially the ending, the way that it's like nothing really gets resolved. Like the friend pretty much is on death's door, and then another dealer just fills in, the shoes of the other one. So it's kind of a sad ending, but very realistic. And I thought that he handled it well. So I really do enjoy this issue. And we should point out, this is not the regular writer or the regular artist of this book of Web of Spider-Man. Right. So it's technically a fill-in, but it is really done. Now, before we jump to Lisa's annotations, I just want to hear Becca's initial review of this story. What'd you think of it, Becca?
I hate drug comic book PSA
issues.
I hate them. I mean, this is definitely not as bad as some of those Cloak and Daggers we read, where they were like, don't do drugs, kids, or else you'll get punched in the face. Like,
right.
This one is very bleak for Spider-Man. It's very like, well, shit happens. Anyway, back to being Spider-Man. I don't know. Leaves a weird taste in my mouth. I didn't like it.
Okay.
It's very jarring to go from, because Lisa didn't have to read the issues before this. You just got so lucky, girl. Oh my God.
All right. Okay, good.
So you go from a story arc of Inferno, which was happened before this, which is basically where demons are ruling or are running around over New York City and possessing inanimate objects and turning the Empire State Building into a big demon monster thing, and a whole mess of stuff's going on, and it's all kind of goofy. And then you're like, don't do coke, kids. I don't know. It's just very jarring to me. Mm-hmm. Also, like, wasn't Harry Osborn turning into the Green Goblin? What are we doing?
Right.
Yeah,
it's definitely a fill-in, but
as we said, it's a fill-in. It doesn't tie in with the other continuity at the time, but
it's also not as bad as when we went from Kraven's Last Hunt to Spider-Man playing football.
With aliens,
Very true.
Right,
for aliens.
That's not that bad, but
yeah.
It's all right. I mean, as far as fill-ins go, it could be a lot worse. So
right.
Okay.
I think I agree. The tone from like last week is very jarring, but I kind of like, and I think the point is for it to leave a bad taste in your mouth. Mm-hmm. Like, it's supposed to be a hard story to read. It definitely wasn't my favorite to read, and I probably won't read it again, but I think it was well done in that sense, where they're able to tell like a story that it's kind of like this is the reality of what's going on, and it can affect anybody, even Spider-Man, who's like jumping around, punching goblins. But
yeah, I just wish I gave a shit about Lorraine as a
fair.
character.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
Because who cares about Lorraine? I don't think. Do we ever see her again?
No.
Yeah, that's what
I'm
I was
not
wondering.
sure we've
Is she
seen
in
her
the
before either.
before
We've
or
seen her
after?
before
Or
a
she
little bit of
just
time.
Yeah.
I will look it up, but I'm going to gamble and say that we never see her again. But I'll confirm it right now.
The last thing on her Wikipedia, it is saying that her parents come to visit her after she has an overdose. So,
There's only ever been 4 appearances.
cool, sick. Yeah, I don't care about Lorraine, so. Like, if like, Liz Allen or somebody that, like, is actually important to Spider-Man's life becomes addicted to drugs, I think that would hit the characters a lot more.
Oh, you know what? We've not been paying attention. She appeared in Web of Spider-Man 41, 42.
She's the one who makes Mary Jane do the naked photo shoots.
Right.
I didn't even realize. Which is also written by Peter David. And then she appears again in Web 51. Okay.
So this woman just only makes bad decisions around Mary Jane.
Right.
That's why she exists as a character, to just be the juxtaposition for Mary Jane to do better things.
Right.
That sucks for her.
I just totally forgot that's what her name was.
Okay.
Cool.
We want to hear Lisa's annotations.
Yeah.
Lisa,
well,
let's lay it on us, okay?
no, like I'm not going to get into any like things like that. But after I read it, like right away, I was like getting these really strong Punky Brewster vibes. So I don't know exactly like how old everybody is, but
I know
if
Punky
you go,
Brewster.
okay, so Punky Brewster back in the day, right? 1980s. And before I talk about Punky Brewster, I completely agree with you guys. One of the things I got out of this, I'm like, this is like a PSA. This is totally a PSA. And then the more I thought about it coming from the 1980s, this is 1989, right? So it's a little bit later in the 80s. But remember the whole like just say no campaign, and there were so many commercials and after school specials. Remember those after school specials where you'd like race home and it was like this emotional, and this is the type of stuff they portrayed. So anyway, after I read this, completely Punky Brewster. Remember that episode where I think it was Cherry who was her best friend, and then like they were hanging out with the cool girls, and they brought this tackle box of drugs, and there's like so many different kinds and colors, and it was so appealing. So, and I remember watching that as a kid and becoming like mortified of drugs. I'm like, they look like candy. Oh my God, I'm gonna say no, right? So like those type of vibes, kind of like the sensationalism. I mean, obviously drugs are bad, right? But the sensationalism, I love how one panel, they're like, oh, how do you do it? I think MJ asked her, how do you stay on top of all your work? And she's like, I take speed. And then the very next panel, she overdoses, right? Like we don't have time to lose here, kids. So right away, it goes into, the troubles of taking drugs and what can happen to you, the lessons. But then it reminded me, so during that time in the 80s, I think almost every sitcom or every show had their special episode, the drug episode. And I think it happened with Different Strokes. I remember Different Strokes that happened. And then all those after school specials and the PSAs. I think this one came a little bit later, but you guys remember the PSA where it was like, this kid is taking drugs. And then the parents are like, well, how do you know how to do it? And they scream out, I learned it from watching you.
Yes, that was the most famous one. Yep.
Yeah. So I think this is the equivalent of one of those just say no to drug episodes, a la Spider-Man. I think that's what it is. And maybe that's why they had a different writer. That's why they had a different artist, because it was just out of the norm for this. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, yeah, the writer and artist who were the regulars would not have really suited this story. Like Alex Saviuk, who does last month and he does next month, his art is a little bit more old-fashioned, and maybe he wouldn't have suited this story as much as appropriately. And I don't think Gerry Conway would have either. So I definitely think it's kind of interesting. I'd like to know the behind-the-scenes facts about this, but I don't know anything about this issue, about why they did it when they did, or who they picked, or anything. But it's definitely possible. maybe it was something that was just sitting in the can, and then maybe they were going to use it as, because sometimes back in those days, Marvel would publish a special issue that was just for kids. Like it would be like a giveaway or, like a special topic or something that specifically to give to kids. Maybe this was one of those that they just used in Spider-Man, like a regular issue. I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder too if there was like something set up, or if there was a mandate, like every once in a while they were like, we have to do an episode about this, or, this is like a really serious topic right now. So it would be good if we wrote a story like this.
Could be.
But yeah, this one, while it did feel PSA like, I definitely appreciate that it wasn't as like corny sitcom as it has been in the past.
Right.
Like what did you think about the tone of this one, Lisa?
Well, I found it like very serious and almost like a social commentary. Later on, after the whole initial introduction to not introduction to Lorraine, but when she took the drugs and she overdosed, when they're looking for help, I think they did it on purpose to really highlight the facts that, listen, if you need help, there's a wait list of 6 months, I think they said.
Right.
And then there was that one page where, all the workers are overworked and they don't have enough people there. But then they're like, but hold on, there's private facilities. And then they investigate that. But it's $50,000 a year. Who can afford it? And I think they're just bringing to the surface like the actual problems that society was facing at that time. And to be honest with you, I think we still have a lot of the same issues. I don't think any of this has been resolved, how many years later. But I got that serious, almost urgent tone, like something needs to be done about this problem,
I want to point out too that those pages where they're going through, like they're cutting back between Spider-Man, kind of like investigating the drug dealer, then they're cutting to Mary Jane, and they cut back to Spider-Man. It's something that today is more common, but back then was fairly experimental. Like a typical comic would not do that. And just a typical comic of 1989 would not trust the reader to understand what was going on, because they used to spoon feed the reader, like, later on or meanwhile, but here they're just cutting back and forth, and they have faith in the reader to be able to follow them, which I thought was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Okay, do you have anything in your notes, Lisa, you want to discuss? Feel free to share.
But I did look into, you guys are familiar with the comic code, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So after I read this, I was like, but this isn't like a superhero-y type thing. And then I was just mentioning it to my husband, and I'm like, what's your take on this? And he's like, well, are you familiar with the comic code? And I was like, no. So I did a little bit of research about the comic code, and, nowadays it's pretty much, gone. But all those different criteria back in the day to be able to get that seal of approval so that, distributors would support you more. So, and one of the things is you have to have a bad villain, and this villain, you can't be sympathetic towards him. You can't be empathetic. This villain is bad. So you can't lead the audience to have any type of sympathy. So then after I was reading that, I'm like, okay, so our villain, what was his name? I have it here. Oh, Winston Shepherd. Talk about a villain. I mean, the guy even wore shoulder pads. That's pretty bad.
Yeah. And unrelatable.
Yeah, right? Mm-hmm. So I see what they were doing, portraying this guy as, just unappealing overall. And he's the bad guy. He's the villain in all of this. But yeah, I had no idea about the comic code because, in modern comic books, obviously it's not a thing anymore. But it was really fascinating to go down that little rabbit hole and figure all that stuff out and where it originated. But essentially, it was a type of censorship, right? So
100%, yeah.
Yeah. So you have to let that go.
Yes.
But I see why, because who ultimately is the audience of these comic books? One would think children. We know that's not, that's not the whole truth. But I guess there needed to be that, that kind of the movie ratings. I guess that was their system back then. So, and that would have applied in the 1980s, correct?
In the 80s?
It was on its way out very little.
The comics code started in the 50s, and then Marvel ditched it in the 2000s. And then DC followed soon after. In the 80s, there was a transition where DC started a rating a system where they started to introduce comics that were for mature readers only. And then as time went on, they had like an entire separate line for mature readers, and like other companies were already doing that. But as far as Marvel and DC, it was very slow to get to that point, but they did eventually do it. And then nowadays, for good or ill, the average Marvel and DC comic is aimed at an older readership.
Yeah.
And then even if they want to do Batman stories with like full nudity, they'll still do it, but they'll just put a different label on it, pretty much.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But there are still
Anyway.
specific comics for kids. Like if you go into any comic book store, you'll see the newest issue of Spider-Man, the newest issue of Batman on the wall, and then there's like a kids comics, and there's the newest issue of whatever it is, nonstop Spider-Man, and like
Right.
Miss Marvel and all of that stuff that's actually like tailored to younger kids.
Yeah,
Versus
I feel
where
like
I think most modern main titles are probably more for like
more like PG-13.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like a
Yeah.
PG-13.
Yeah, it's
And then-
it's more it's closer to like what you were saying, Lisa, like today, where it's like the movie ratings, like they all have kind of like a rating on the covers.
Right.
And then you go to the back of the store, that's where all the Dynamite comics are. And you got your Vampirellas and your Fairy Tale and your Barbarellas and all those comics that I don't buy or read at all. I don't do that as objectification of women.
Okay, anyway.
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, we just started this last week, our new system of, we invented this thing where we give it a rating out of 10. No one else has ever done that. So I'm going to give this comic, you know what? I think on a Spider-Man scale, I'll give it a 7. I think it's a really good issue. I think the writing is really good. The art is fine, but the art's a little bit sloppy, like for my taste. So I'll give it a 7 out of 10. But I definitely, this is one of the ones that I remember, and I reread many times. So I like it. Josh, what about you?
Yeah, I think maybe a 7 is pretty good. I think that it's not necessarily the best story, but I think as far as PSAs go, especially for the time, it's really good. The art and the writing is like a little bit above average from what we're normally reading today, or what we've been reading from the 80s. So yeah, I'd say a 7.
Vex Luthor.
I'm going to give it a 6 little baggies of cocaine out of 10. Mostly because if you're going to do a meaningful story like this, I wish it was just utilize the characters that are meaningful to the audience. Because you can't just be like, in this issue we introduce Drugs McGee. She's on drugs. Don't you feel bad for her? I'm like, no.
Okay.
Fair.
Okay, Lisa, what do you give it out of 10?
I would say like 7.5. And again, I don't have too much experience in the comic book world, but I did like it was a time capsule. It brought me back to those PSAs. It brought me back to that time. And ultimately, from a literary perspective, at many times we were debating whether or not it was a flashback, but then the plots do line up, and the plots they're kind of like parallel plots where we have the villain who's dying off at the same time where Lorraine is dying off. She doesn't die. But I thought that was very clever. I liked it. I liked the whole cyclical feel of it, where it's like we go through this story and all this drama, and then at the end, we're back to where we started. And I thought that was a very clever ending. I enjoyed that. And 7.5.
Awesome. Okay. Now we are going to jump to Amazing Spider-Man 314. Now, I like to talk about my childhood with Spidey. Remember how I said that last month was the first issue I bought, like, unprompted? No, it wasn't. This was the one. Because up until this point, I bought G.I. Joe and Transformers. Otherwise, the only comics I bought were based on the cover. If there was a really cool cover or a really enticing story, I would buy it. This was the first comic I bought as a regular reader where I went, I don't care, I am now buying Spider-Man for the rest of my life. This was the one, this Christmas story where nothing exciting is happening other than Peter and Mary Jane are getting evicted, which I think is awesome. So that's what I just wanted to point that out.
Well,
It's not awesome. Like, I don't want to be evicted, but it's a good story. You know what I mean? So,
But on Christmas Eve, right? On Christmas Eve. Isn't
very
it?
dramatic, right?
Very dramatic. Absolutely.
And just for the record, Central Avenue and Tecumseh Road, you know where the Pizza Hut used to be, Lisa?
Yeah.
Next to there was one of the oldest comic stores in Windsor, was called Olympic Records. That's where I used to get my comics. And I remember going there and getting this comic the day it came out, or the day after it came out. And that's where I got all my comics at the time. Yep. It was a good time.
Would you ride your BMX bike there?
No, it was actually pretty far because I lived in Forest Glade. But I would ride my BMX to like construction sites, to like hills, to forests, get lost for 12 hours and come back. And yeah, absolutely.
Oh, if you had told me, no, I rode my like banana seed bike there, then I would have been like blown away. But I guess that didn't happen.
Not quite. Oh, did I tell you that I named my bike? Okay. So I was obsessed with Transformers as a kid.
Okay.
So I called my bike. My
Power
bike was
glider?
No, close. My bike was blue, but it had yellow pads. Like, you know those pads? Like the pad like on the top bar, pad on like the thing. Anyway, my bike was called Sunstreak.
Nice.
As in Sunstreaker, but without the ER. Yeah, I completely forgot about that until just now. And I used to have those little pogo sticks on the back so someone could ride behind me and like put their hands on my shoulders.
That's
Isn't that awesome?
So cool.
Did they ever?
Of course.
Oh, wow.
Of course.
He had friends. Who knew?
I was a ladies' man when I was 10 years old, okay? It was all downhill after that, but I was a ladies' man at one point.
Yeah,
Come on,
hanging out
babe.
at the comic book
sorry.
shop.
Hop on the back. I'm going to buy Spidey comics.
I just don't have a lot of experience with bikes. I didn't go outside as a kid, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway. That's an episode of Stranger Things coming your way. If I ever do my Stranger Things 80s tribute, you're going to see a scene with that happening, okay?
and then just pan to
That's
me
awesome.
in my basement by myself.
There you
not
go,
going out in the sun. Adventures.
It's okay. You'll thank yourself when you're 60 and you have no wrinkles.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Thanks for running with that, Becca. Anyway, okay, now we're gonna go to the comic. Amazing Spider-Man 314. And Becca, you're gonna tell us what happens in this one.
I am. I just also want to point out some fun facts on the Marvel Wiki page, which I love to do about this issue. So it gives a couple continuity notes, and most of them are pretty basic. Like, it's like, oh, this is who Jonathan Caesar was, or at the time of the story this happened, or like the other Flash's apartment was trashed by demons in the Inferno event. Be like, oh, cool, yeah, that's what happened to Flash's apartment. And then it just says, the last note says, Peter's Uncle Ben was murdered by a burglar. As seen in Amazing Spider-Man number 15. I'm like, yeah, I know that. Thank you. That's the one that I know, for sure. Like,
They do a pretty good job of talking about that in this issue, I'm pretty sure, too.
Yeah, it's like, this is the space for the notes for like, oh, if you don't know what's going on in continuity, you read this. Be like, just in case you didn't know, Uncle Ben's dead. So yeah, we start off, and if you know anything about me, you know I hate when Santa Claus is on the cover of comic books. So here we go again. Remember that issue where Santa is smoking?
Yep.
I hate that issue. That's one of my favorite comic books.
This might be the real Santa here,
because
though.
it's the best.
Yeah, no, it's because that's the issue where Spider-Man talks to his suit.
Yes, yes.
And treats him like another person.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
I used to read some of these issues. I'll put it on my to be read list, TBR. Yeah.
Some of them are not good. This one's in the middle. So we start off with Mary Jane and Peter getting evicted from their apartment. Their apartment was owned by a man named Jonathan Caesar, who's in jail right now because he kidnapped Mary Jane and locked her in his apartment for a week.
Creepy.
But I guess he still owns a building and can evict them from the building.
Right.
And his lawyer's threatening them, and that's just... They seem to take it really well. I wouldn't. But yeah, so Mary Jane escaped, and all that fun stuff happened. Remember, Taskmaster was there. That's fun. Peter threatens the lawyer, and the lawyer's like, another lawsuit coming. So they all leave their apartment, and it's Christmas Eve, and they're like, what are we going to do? And Aunt May's like, well, don't worry. You can stay at my house. I haven't touched your bedroom since you left when you were in college. And I'm like, well, that's weird. But anyway, and then Peter's like, nah, we got somewhere to stay. And Mary Jane's like, oh, that's news to me. And then you find out that they don't have anywhere to stay. Peter was just lying because he doesn't want to go back and living at home. So he's just going to figure it out, I guess. Then we pan to the B plot of this story, which is like just this old Scrooge man making this employee work on Christmas Day, and it looks like he's finally fed up and he's gonna kill his boss. So back to Peter and Mary Jane. They have to pay people to move all of their furniture, and they're storing it at Aunt May's place. And Peter is like, well, don't worry, I'll figure something out about it. So... And then a mugging happens, right? A mugging happens, and Peter's, like, exhausted about it. He's like, oh, I guess I'll save someone's life. Like, he's so tired with it. So he webs up this burglar, or this mugger, and he returns this lady's purse, and she's super thankful, and she gives him cookies. He is very not appreciative about it. We go back to the B plot, where I don't really know what's going on. I'm gonna definitely need help with this one. But... There's a bunch of guys tied up in a van. Like, they're supposed to be the guys who work for the Scrooge guy, I think. And then the smaller guy with the gun hires these goons to pretend to be them.
Yes.
That's what I think's going on. So Peter is going around looking for help and places to stay, so he goes to work to talk to as many friends at the Daily Bugle. And they're having their annual Christmas party there. It just so happens at the same time. So J. Jonah is not helpful at all, but tells Peter that he should go, have fun and do whatever. And Peter just walks past all of the friends he has at the Daily Bugle and decides if they are worth asking if he can sleep on their couch with his wife to them. He goes to Joe Robertson and is like, can't do that. He's literally being charged with accessory to murder. He goes to Joan Mercado and he's like, single lady, probably shouldn't go live with her. And then Jonah is just, like, not an option at all. So they still don't have anywhere to go. So Peter goes to his good friend Flash Thompson, whose apartment building was just destroyed by demons last week, from the Inferno event, as the wiki reminded me. So he's like, well, Peter, I don't really have an apartment for you to stay at. I've been just staying at this back room at the gym, but you're welcome to stay there, and I'll sleep somewhere else. And I'm like, helpful, thank you. So far, this is Peter's best option. We go back over to the B plot with the guy that we don't care about and the other guy we don't care about, and he finally is like, hey, I'm sick of working on Christmas. I'm gonna kill you. And Peter is downtrodden and doesn't know what to do, so he does what he does best, and he goes and mopes in a graveyard. He goes to Uncle Ben's grave, and he's like, oh, I wish you were still alive, because then you'd be able to help me, even though his aunt is still alive and willing to help him, but alright. Back at the B plot, we got the actual security sees a gun and starts shooting, and so they take Santa Claus hostage, because Santa Claus is there for some reason. And Peter hears all this as he's at the grave of Uncle Ben, and he goes, he's like, oh, better stop this gunfight. And of course the goons are trying to escape through the cemetery for some reason. So Peter makes a couple quips to each one of them as he defeats them, and he comes up to this just basic nerd guy who's absolutely, like, just at his wit's end and was gonna kill his boss, and he just decks him right in the cheek, and it's great. And then Santa climbs on top of him and starts beating him up too for taking him hostage. Peter and Santa have a moment together for some reason, and then it's back to moping for Peter. He goes back to put on his regular Peter Parker clothes, and it turns out Aunt May's at Uncle Ben's grave as well, because that's her ex-husband. And they have an actually nice moment where Peter's like, you know what, I am gonna come live with you guys, actually. Not because I don't have any other options, but because that's what I wanted all along. And so then it's Christmas Eve at Aunt May's place, and Christy's also there. Don't forget she's there.
Yeah, anyway.
Also, Venom's coming up next. Hey! Can't fucking wait. We're like, why? Okay.
Wait. Becca, you can't... Did you just swear? You know that Lisa's students are listening to this podcast?
Did I swear?
Didn't you say fucking?
Oh my god, Mike swore.
No, you swore. Now
Too
you
late.
ruined it for
Okay.
everybody.
Wait,
So,
you
like-
didn't tell me that there would be kids listening at the beginning
Guys.
of this.
They're not kids. They have graduated from grade 12s. They're 18. Some of them are 26. Like, they're fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
Mike, they're
okay.
fucking 18.
all right. Fuck them. They'll be fine.
No!
Okay.
No.
Okay, so...
No, I'm using my mother's rules of swearing here. You're allowed to swear as long as you don't swear at each other.
Okay.
That was my rules
As
growing
long-
up.
As long as I don't swear, because if they hear me swear, then that's like scandalous.
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair,
I'll flip
fair.
that for sure.
Yeah.
So, I'll just say... Huh?
I'm sorry, I'm just really anxious now.
No, it's all good. Don't worry.
I'm sorry, kids.
We only have 6 listeners a week. It doesn't matter. Anyway,
And they'll all
So-
be my students.
yeah. So, yeah. You know what's funny is, like, I've read these amazing Spider-Mans many times, and I've read this one a million times, but to me, it's just as good as the first time I read it. I really like this issue for many reasons. One of them is that it's very low-key. There's no supervillain, right? The bad guy is just this... employee who's disgruntled with his boss. The conflict is they get kicked out of their apartment, and then Peter, I actually really like the fact that Peter lies to Aunt May, but then realizes that he should just stay with her just to kind of make her feel good. He kind of swallows his pride, right? And I think that this is one of the things, Lisa, we talk about, is that Spider-Man is technically... He's not in high school. He's like college age, but he's still learning. He's constantly making mistakes. He's constantly saying stupid things, doing stupid things. And I think that's part of his charm, is that he is still like a teenager or a late teenager. So that's one of the things I like about this issue, is that he kind of
He's
like...
a grown married man.
He's married, but he's still in college. You know what I mean? Like, it's they're kind of like... He's kind of between ages, because on one hand... The editors forced him to get married, but on the other hand, the writers write him as if he's young. So, you know? But anyway.
Yeah.
So I thought this issue was really good. I also got to appreciate the... well, you know what? I'm going to save my certain comments for later, but I thought this issue was really good, and I'm a sucker for Christmas stories, so this comic holds a special place in my heart. But Josh, what were you going to say?
It feels like a Christmas special. Like the tone of
Another PSA.
The tone of it feels very like Hallmark movie, right?
I've never seen one, so...
What? You've
You're
never seen
missing
a Hallmark?
out. The
Yes.
Christmas Prince?
You might convince me to watch
Right?
Coronation Street, but I'll never watch a Hallmark movie. But anyway.
That's fair.
Dude.
No,
You can't tell
it's
people that I watch Coronation Street.
yeah. So it's like it has that kind of like holiday movie feel to it. Everything's kind of cheesy. The bad guy is like a evil businessman who's making his, but but just like every holiday movie, I feel like there's certain moments where I'm just like, okay, a little strange. I don't know why you've made this choice. It's really weird that they set up that this bad guy is like running this business and like being shitty to his employees, and then they make the employee that he's mistreating the bad guy. You know what I mean? Like it feels like kind of like, hold up, shouldn't we try and make like the bad businessman who's like forcing his employees to do this like job on a day when they should be closed, and then like yelling at the banks being closed and all that stuff. Like it just feels like maybe it was a mistake making like the poorly paid worker a bad guy, but
well, I know what you're saying, but I think it's more like it's like making the villains have a realistic motivation.
True.
Because this
Yeah.
guy, you can relate to how he's feeling. It doesn't mean he should necessarily have a gun and do like a heist or whatever, but at least he has a logical motivation rather than
Right.
just, I'm going to wreak havoc
True.
and fight
That's very
Spider-Man,
true.
right? So that's why
Yeah.
I like it. But,
and then another part, and this is probably more me nitpicking because we see it so much in Spidey comics, but him going to Uncle Ben's grave twice is what bothers me.
Does he go twice?
He goes later with Aunt May.
Yeah,
he goes
Well, the
back,
whole
yeah.
fight takes place in the cemetery, right?
Right.
So like he doesn't leave the cemetery, but he does go from the gravestone. Then he comes back to it.
He swaps clothes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it would have been maybe a better idea to like have it take place somewhere else, and then he meets up with Aunt May in the cemetery with Uncle Ben, and then he has this moment of realization, like, you know, my aunt and uncle have always been there for me. Why wouldn't they be here for me now? I'd let my pride get in the way, yada yada yada. Mm-hmm. But all in all, it's a cute Christmas issue. I really like that they get evicted, and like them dealing with it. Like they wrote it really well, I found. I love that MJ's kind of just like, are you serious? Like, all right, I guess we won't go into the warm home on Christmas Eve. We'll, go sleep in the back of a gym or something.
Ew.
But
MJ is the definition of ride or die. She's like, whatever you want to do, Pete. Like, I'm with you on this one. Dumb.
Bex Luthor, tell us your review.
I hate Christmas comics.
Tell us what you really think.
Okay. I despise Santa Claus as a concept. As you can tell, I had a great childhood. Yeah. No, why does Santa have to be here? Why? Just because it's Christmas? I don't understand. Yeah, no, the Uncle Ben stuff ticked me off too. I'm just tired of. Todd McFarlane wanted to draw him moping at a grave, so we gotta have him moping at a grave. I think it would have been much more impactful if he was like, I gotta talk to Uncle Ben about this, and he goes and Aunt May's already there, and he's like, oh right, we're a family. Idiot, Peter. Like, I think that would have been a better ending than him going and moping by himself and then coming back and Aunt May's there. Yeah, I wonder where the choice to have them evicted comes from. Because, they're... Like, why?
I can tell you why.
Yeah, I want to know.
So can I...
It's gotta be,
Okay, I'll give my theory, is that Peter Parker's always down on his luck, and since he's been married to Mary Jane, he's been, living the high life, and so this is a way to get him back down to being down on his luck. That's what I think it is. What's your theory, Lisa?
Well, all of this... I couldn't imagine, I couldn't even count the amount of references to Christmas movies, classic Christmas movies. Like It's a Wonderful Life, A Christmas Carol, those old school Christmas movies. Because even on the cover, the apartment building, the Bedford Towers? Is that well known, Bedford Towers? It's that's where he lives, or that's where Aunt May lives? What's the story on that?
They've lived there for maybe a year, but is that a reference to something?
Well, when Peter and Mary Jane got married, they moved into this fancy apartment.
Okay, because Bedford Falls is the setting for It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh.
Interesting.
So I don't know if that was done on purpose.
Is that maybe just a New York thing, maybe?
Maybe. But as soon as I saw the cover, I'm like, that's a reference to It's a Wonderful Life. I knew that. And then going on a little bit more, and when you guys were asking about why would they have him work on Christmas Eve? That's the whole plot of A Christmas Carol with Bob Cratchit, the father of Tiny Tim, and he has to make money, and the equivalent of Scrooge would be what is his name? Howell Thurston III, the guy who's at the department store, the big boss. All the way through, there's these little, it's a combination of all the Christmas movies together, probably including some of those Hallmark movies you haven't seen, Mike, which you should.
But to be fair, those Hallmark movies did not exist in 1989, right?
I know. No, they didn't. But, and then, Peter visiting Uncle Ben, it's the whole vibe of, the ghost of Christmas past. Even though Uncle Ben doesn't say anything, he has that moment where he's reflecting upon the past. And then all of a sudden he becomes like a better person, kind of like Scrooge did, right? So the whole thing is all like this homage to all these Christmas movies that everybody's familiar with.
Yes. That I've watched over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my take from it. And I was trying to say, okay, well, who's who? So then would that mean that like Peter would be George Bailey kind of thing?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting that you pointed out the It's a Wonderful Life like reference or whatever. Because if the guy who runs the company is like Scrooge, or what's the guy's name in It's a Wonderful Life? The guy who runs the bank. What's his name? Whatever his name is, but
my tongue. Yeah,
it's kind of interesting. Instead of making him the bad guy, they make the assistant the bad guy, kind of, right? So at least that's a little twist. Now,
so there's a twist where it's like, you know, Bob Cratchit gets his revenge, which is kind of fun.
Now, as far as having another reference to Uncle Ben, like the death and all that, I just got to say, because Lisa, you're a fan of Coronation Street, right? And I'm a fan of Doctor Who, right? Doctor Who's been around for 50 years. But one of the things that
Coronation Street has been around for 60 years if it's a competition.
Actually, Doctor Who's been around for about 58, so it's catching up. But anyway.
Okay, whatever.
It'll eventually overtake it. But anyway, Doctor Who, one of the things they say about Doctor Who is that when people analyze the old episodes, some other people are like, you realize that this was not meant to be analyzed on Blu-ray 50 years after it was aired. It was meant to be watched once and forgotten about. And it kind of goes for a comic like this, where they didn't think that 40-year-olds or 30-year-olds or 20-year-olds would be analyzing it in 2022 and going, why are they at Ben's grave again? When they were just their last issue. It was meant to be read. Spider-Man was probably meant to be read for like a 3-year period. Never thought of again. And then or if you did read it, you would forget about what happened because it didn't even matter. And then you just go on to the next thing, right? So that's why they're kind of, every few issues, they have to remind you how he got his powers, Uncle Ben, blah, 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 right? So that's probably why he's at the grave again. But anyway.
Oh, another question I had on the cover. It says, because you guys say sometimes there's like jokes on the cover or just weird things. So it says the non-mutant superhero, the Amazing Spider-Man. Is that like poking at what? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, X-Men? What would it be?
X-Men.
It's X-Men, yeah. We talked about this a few weeks ago. It's because X-Men was so popular at the time that anything that had mutant in the title would sell. So as a joke, they called him the non-mutant superhero just to kind of like make a joke out of it. But that's why, definitely.
I like that.
And just so you know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Right now, I'm that meme of the guy in the bar who's like talking in your ear. But Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a parody of X-Men and Daredevil and all that stuff. So that's why it's called Mutant. Yeah. Anyway,
it's not a parody of Daredevil because Daredevil loses his eyesight from the ooze that turns the turtles into turtles.
Okay, Becca, now you're the girl talking to me in the bar.
Like, oh, that's what it sounds like. Oh, I hate that. Stay away from me.
Okay, anyway.
We could out-fun fact each other all night, I think.
Yes.
It no longer is fun.
Anyway. Okay, here's one thing we have not talked about. We talked about the art for the other issue briefly. But Lisa, without giving you any context, I just want to know what your impression was of the art in this issue.
Like, which one? The one we're still, the Christmas one?
Amazing Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man, the Christmas one.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm coming from a perspective of like, I don't know any different. So when I see it, I'm like, okay, this works. But I do have to say that a lot of the characters, like Peter especially, it's not how I envision him. I don't know, everything just looks different to me. But I don't have a lot of history behind me to compare to anything else. It's not what I would expect. Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, the reason we asked that is because this is Todd McFarlane, who's kind of like the most popular artist of like the entire, 1990s, late 80s. He's like, I don't know. I was trying to think of like, what would be the film equivalent of Todd McFarlane if we were to give like an analogy? Like, would it be Quentin Tarantino? Someone who just like blew everything up and changed everything? Maybe?
Yeah, possibly.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know anything about films.
But yeah, something
if it's
like
not
that.
Zack Snyder, I don't care.
Yeah,
anyway.
maybe like the Star Wars of its time, because like Star Wars it's not like award-winning film or story.
It was nominated for Best Picture, but go ahead, Josh. Yeah, anyway.
Did it win?
It lost, but it was
Okay.
nominated.
But
Do you even know what won in 77? That'll tell you how.
No.
Exactly. That shows you how important
Hold
that
on,
is.
hold on.
But it changed, right?
Yes, it changed everything. Yes,
right.
yes.
That's what I mean. It's very stylistic. It has a totally different feel, just like Star Wars had like a different feel to what action or space stories can be, or sci-fi. We're kind of leading to the fantasy aspect of it. This leans into kind of like the stylistic side of superheroes and pushing certain things instead of others and telling a story just through like what's happening to the actual panels themselves, not even like what's inside the panels, right? So it's very innovative in the way that it's telling a story, just like that,
Yeah. So and as we usually do with McFarlane issues, I just want to quickly talk about some of my favorite panels because as we know, I've read this issue a million times. If you even jump to page 2, which is digital page 3, because we include the cover, that shot of Mary Jane just standing there with the steam. Is that called steam? When it's like cold out, is it
breath?
Steam?
Like you see her like cold breath,
Yeah, when the breath is coming out of her mouth. I love that shot right there. It's great.
Yeah.
Like the whole style of the way he draws Mary Jane. Again, his art is improving with every issue, and I think it's like almost perfect by this point. When him grabbing the sleazy the guy, like the lawyer or whatever he is, like that's great. And then you flip through the guy who runs the corporation, the detail on his beard, like the line work there. Excellent. Very Art Adams there. It's great. And then like the delivery guy who has him sign the clipboard, the detail that he put into like the fat on his face and the scruff and stuff. That's just great.
I like a few pages later when he's catching the guy that steals the purse. When he like webs up like almost like a net in between two trees, and we see the first panel on that page. The guy's running away, and then the second panel, we just see him getting caught in the web, and we can see the like speed and the force of him moving forward, but the webs are slowing him down, and we can almost like see the webs like creasing into like the folds of his face as they're kind of like squishing back. And then the next panel, he's like flat up against it. It's just we don't see the like the elasticity of like the web bouncing back, but we can feel it in the way that the panels were told.
Yes,
it's really good.
Yep, good point. Also, Jonah Jameson in the Daily Bugle, the skinny panel where you just see like the inside halves of his eyes
huffing his hoagie,
right, and like the little Hitler mustache and the stogie with the smoke coming up. It's just great. Oh, so creative. And also, again, talk about a little bit of experimentation. Like McFarlane is kind of derided for being kind of like, I don't want to say trashy, but kind of like lowbrow. But this is experimentation. Having Peter Parker in the exact same pose for 4 panels in a row, but just different people around him that he's considering asking if he can stay with him, and then ending in the punchline of J. Jonah Jameson, right? Like spitting his cigar out at him as he asks him a question. It's great, you know? Oh, I mean, I could talk about more, but Lisa, I know you've got your annotations. Did you want to talk about, was there any other annotations that you wanted to talk about in this issue?
No, but the one thing I want to add, though, I always like these endings because, like, in this ending, it's kind of like a sneak peek to the next issue. So I think it's like actually the form of a PS. It's like, PS, enjoy peace on Earth while you can, Spider-Man, because next issue, Venom returns. And I'm like, oh, I want to read the next one, you know?
Yes.
And I think 'cause a lot of times, you know, the endings of stories or novels or whatever, it's just, okay, let's tie up all the loose ends and we're done. But they really put a lot of thought into how they are finishing these to attract more customers, so to say, you know, more of an audience to go out and buy, you know, cliffhangers. even the first issue we were talking about, the ending, how it was like this whole cyclical thing. So it didn't feel like the end. It was like, okay, well, even though the next issue obviously is not going to be about the same thing, it has that forward moving feeling to it where you want to continue and buy the next issue. So I don't know. I think that's very clever.
I agree.
Good.
Becca, did you have anything else to add?
I can't wait for Venom next week. I'm sure it'll be great.
It will be. You're right. Anyway, okay,
Yeah,
so
just like the first issue with Venom in it. Great.
Yeah, it was great. They're all great. Yeah. Anyway.
It's an expensive comic book, but is it a good one?
Well, I thought it was good, but anyway. So I'm gonna give this one. Let me see. I got to give it at least. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 because I think it's a little bit better than the Web. Again, maybe I'm prejudiced because I read it so many times as a kid, but I love this issue. There's a lot to enjoy with this one. Even like the fact that there's snow on the logo. We didn't talk about that. There's Spider-Man on the cover with a Santa hat. Oh, there's so much to enjoy with this one. I loved it. 7.5. Yeah. Josh, what do you give it?
I think it was a 6.5 maybe.
Ooh,
I don't know. Like, I feel like it was an okay Christmas episode. I like that they've got Peter and MJ being evicted. Like, that's a super interesting, fun story to follow along with, and like a new thing for them to be doing.
You can't use Skype emotes when no one can see them.
Yeah, thank you.
It's for you guys. I'm shocked. Anyway,
thank you. But it's a fine Spidey issue. Still a pass. It still would be a recommend.
Bex Luthor?
5 out of 10 dead uncles. I don't know.
Oh, no, that's so many dead uncles.
Yeah. I despise wholesome Christmas stuff. I just am a horrible person, I guess. Don't get me wrong. I love ripping apart those crappy Hallmark Christmas movies. The Mistletones, fantastic. Like, what's the one with Vanessa Hudgens? One of them. She's in
the
all
Christmas
of them.
Prince?
No, the one where she's like 3 of the same person.
That sounds enticing.
She's like there's triplets. She's like triplets. Maybe it's the Christmas Prince too. Anyway, I only like it when it's bad, and this isn't bad enough for me to like it.
Okay.
So it's fine.
5?
Sure.
Okay. Lisa, what do you give it out of 10?
Well, I have to be a little bit higher than what I gave for the other one. I liked it a little bit better, so I will give it an 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's that whole element of, like, I'm not gonna lie, I love the Christmas season, and when like Elf is on TV, network television, I will like go watch it and watch the commercials just because there's Christmas commercials to get me in the Christmas mood. You know what I mean? Like that type of feeling. That's what this gave me. It's, and all those references to all the, a bunch of Easter eggs. It's great where I could be like, wait, is that that? Is that that? So it was kind of like, I don't know, a Where's Waldo in the world of Spider-Man meets Scrooge.
Yes.
So I thought it was interactive, like a game. So I liked it.
Look at that. Extra levels to Spider-Man. I like it. Cool.
Yeah. Oh, and there was that one panel too, I think, Josh, maybe you talked about it, where there's a moment between Santa and Spider-Man where Santa says, I forget what he says, but he's like, us heroes have to like stick together. It's not what he said, but something like that. And I'm like, look at that. Santa considering himself a hero. Good for him. Good for his like ego, Sometimes you just wonder about Santa. Is he okay? I mean, he lives in the North Pole. There's a lot of darkness there. So I think he's okay.
See, look at that. I love that. Extra layers here.
I have a Santa-related question. I know Santa exists in the DC universe. Does Santa also exist in the Marvel universe? I think he does, and I think he's a mutant.
Not officially, but...
Right?
Oh, wait a minute,
Right,
Becca.
no, I think he does.
In the issue that you criticized where Santa Claus is smoking, holding a gun, in that story, they implied Santa Claus is real, remember?
I'm pretty sure he's a mutant.
Okay. Anyway.
If I remember correctly. Hold on.
Well, while you're doing your research...
Thank you. Did you know Santa Claus is sometimes called Papa Noel?
Okay.
That's not helpful to me.
Okay. So
There's
what
definitely universes where he's real.
Papa Noel, that's the thing.
I'm looking at a panel of Santa Claus with the Infinity Gauntlet on from Earth 42409. Just so you know, Santa's real.
Before we get
Okay.
too off track, we got to talk
Not too
about.
bad.
We still got one more comic to go through, guys.
Fine.
Sometimes Santa is Odin, I guess, in Marvel Comics.
Okay, Spectacular Spider-Man number 149. Okay, now as I was reading this one, Lisa, I was thinking maybe I should have sent you some pretext, but then again, if you were a kid reading this for the first time in 1989, you'd have no pretext, so you wouldn't know anything. So it's kind of like, I want to know what your impression is. So let's talk about what happens in this one. So we got a cover here of Carrion kicking Spider-Man in the face. And the title is, If Gwen Stacy Wasn't a Clone, What About Carrion? Now, we're not going to give any pretext, but we are going to give a little bit of pretext from the previous weeks, because there was a story that we read in Spectacular Spider-Man Annual where we find out that the clone of Gwen Stacy that was previously thought to be a clone is not a clone. Now, Lisa, do you know who Gwen Stacy is?
No.
Okay. So Gwen Stacy,
That doesn't matter.
Yeah, Gwen Stacy was Spider-Man's girlfriend for like 100 or so issues. Then the Green Goblin murdered her in the Amazing Spider-Man movies featuring, what's his name, Andrew Garfield?
Andrew Garfield, yeah.
She's played by Emma Stone, and she's killed in the second film, which follows the comic book story. In the comic books, she was then revived as a clone, as was, well, after Peter Parker was also cloned. It's a long story. We're not going to go into it. All you have to know is that in the Spectacular Spider-Man Annual, even though we thought she was a clone, it's revealed that she wasn't a clone. It was a virus that infected a real person and turned her into a clone of Gwen Stacy.
Yeah, and they explain it a bit, right, in this issue. I got that much, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like when I shouted out, no, I don't know who she is or was. I feel like, like you said, all 6 listeners all of a sudden are like gasping, and I've just lost all credibility.
No, it's fine. It's all good. It's okay.
I feel like she was only recently kind of mainstream for Spider-Man. Like,
True.
She was definitely, like, back in the day, she was big, but I don't think it was really a household name. MJ is very, like, popular.
Because of the movies, yeah.
Yeah, because of the movies and everything.
And Gwen was not in the cartoon, the 90s cartoon either.
No, yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, that's totally okay. And then, like, the newer Spider-Man, the middle Spider-Man movies with Andrew Garfield, they came out a while ago, and they after the second one, it kind of, like, flatlined and was, like, dropped until recently. So I feel like if you don't know Spider-Man too well, you're not going to know Gwen Stacy.
Yeah, I think she's more popular now because she's in Spider-Gwen, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Like nobody really, like, besides like Spider-Man comic fans, nobody really cared about Gwen Stacy that much.
Yeah.
Once she died and then was a clone and then came back and then wasn't a clone but then was a clone again. Sorry?
Have you seen the animated Spider-Man movie?
Which one? Oh, Spider-Verse? You
Into
talking
the
about Lisa?
Spider-Verse? Lisa?
Oh, no.
No? Okay.
Okay. Well, there's an alternate universe where Gwen becomes Spider-Man instead of Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And so her name's Spider-Gwen. And that comic has, like, taken over the popularity. That's what people know Gwen Stacy for now, more than just Peter's dead girlfriend. Who then was cloned, but then wasn't. It turned out it wasn't a clone, but then
Comics are weird.
as of this point, right now, she's not a clone. But late in 10 years, they go, no, that retcon was a retcon.
So they can go back and change things, right? They can be
All the
kind of in
time.
soap
They do
operas
that
when
all
they
the
kill
time.
somebody off, and then all of a
Unfortunately.
sudden they're back because
Right.
Yes.
they didn't really die.
Yeah.
Nice.
Nobody dies in Marvel Comics.
Yeah, it's like a
Nobody.
soap opera.
They can always come back.
Yeah.
So this issue, we start off with a werewolf. I guess a wolf. A wolf. Did I spoil it?
No.
I mean,
I was
no,
going to
it's
say,
the
who
first thing
could have
that happens.
predicted?
So we didn't know this was coming, but we see a
Nobody knew.
wolf attacking a bunch of guys at the docks, right? So a bunch of guys, a bunch of goons get attacked by this wolf. And then we cut over to a guy called the Arranger. and he's woken up in the middle of the night by a guy who says there was a message sent by this wolf, and it said, "Kingpin, the wolves come for you." Now, Lisa, do you know who the Kingpin is?
No.
Okay, no problem. The Kingpin is basically like a mafia don. He's the godfather of New York in Marvel Comics.
I know what the terminology means. So
Yeah.
I get that. Okay.
But in Marvel
Yes.
Comics, they just call him the Kingpin. Like, that's his name.
So it's
It'd be
an
like
actual
if his name
character.
was, my name is Gangster. That's how creative they are, okay?
Okay,
Right.
okay, I get it.
Okay, so he's the Kingpin. So anyway, so we cut over to Peter Parker in class at college, and he's thinking about, wait a minute. If Gwen Stacy wasn't a clone, what about Carrion? Now, again, I promised you I wasn't going to give you backstory, and we are going to cover this in a minute, but there was a guy named Miles Warren, and he's the one that created the Gwen Stacy clone, and then he became the Jackal, and then he died, and he came back as a clone named Carrion. That's all you need to know, okay?
Yep.
So then...
Maybe
friends
more
at school.
confusing.
Yeah, it's probably worse now. So Peter Parker is like, what about Carrion? So he, leaves class, and then he goes down. I don't know what kind of university this is, but there's this old abandoned basement. Actually, this is like the University of Windsor. An old abandoned basement with all these like cobwebs and like boarded up rooms and stuff. And he just magically goes into this room and pulls like a floor, not panel, whatever that's called. And there's this like book that's in there that just happens to be the lost diary of Miles Warren, who's giving like a diary, and he starts to read it. He's like, oh, hey, look, here's some evidence. So he walks away. And then, of course, somehow this guy that was in class picking on Peter Parker happens to be hiding underneath this cement stairway. And then he goes in, and Peter left the stone like thing off of the floor. And so like there's a big hole there. So he just reaches in and pulls this potion out. Very convenient. We cut over to this ongoing subplot where a guy named Tombstone is on trial. This guy here, Joe Robertson, the guy who's in the court, he's on trial because 20 years ago he saw Tombstone murder somebody, and he didn't report it to the police. So therefore, he's considered an accessory to murder, and that's what this trial is about. And then we cut over to Gloria Grant in the Daily Bugle, and we find out that she is in love with a guy named Eduardo Lobo. Now, Lisa, I know that you teach French, but do you know what Lobo means in Spanish? Did you see La Bamba?
Yes.
Do you remember the band that played all of Richie Valens' songs in the movie? Remember what they were called?
No.
I don't either. But... It has the word Lobo in it, and I know that Lobo means wolf. So this woman is dating a guy named Eduardo Lobos. Or Lobo? Is it Lobo or Lobos?
Just Lobo.
Just Lobo.
Lobo.
Which means wolf. And so astute readers will put together the fact that this Eduardo Lobo and his brother are werewolves.
Yeah, I only got it just now.
The only way they could have made it more obvious if they named them Barkley Wolfman.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, they name them, and just for context, Lisa, when we are introduced to these extremely hairy brothers, they only make wolf puns.
Yeah.
And like they're constantly like their gang is like the wolf pack or something. Like it's only
it's
wolf
ridiculous.
related.
So it's pretty obvious.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
obvious, but still a secret.
Right.
Now,
If
I
you're just
should
picking up this comic, it might be a little bit more ambiguous if you don't have like the knowledge of Lobo. Lobo's
Yeah, but
meaning in
now
Spanish.
that we have been schooled on the term Lobo,
Right.
I mean, right.
Now, here's the thing. Remember how I said I didn't remember the name of the band that played all those songs?
Yeah.
I found it. It's Los Lobos. Okay?
There you
Oh.
go. I will say though, I mean, nobody knew about Darth Vader.
Oh.
And
Vader
his
means
name
father,
literally means
right?
Dark Father, right?
Yeah.
Father, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Did nobody like take the time to figure that out? I mean, it seems like it's not that complicated.
The internet didn't exist, so people were not able to like
I guess.
go to the library and just
I
look
guess.
up Dutch or whatever language it's in,
German.
right? Is it
German,
German?
yeah.
I think it's also Dutch, isn't it? No? Okay.
Perhaps. If you're
Okay.
lucky,
Well,
perhaps.
there was that guy who just, like, one of the guys who was working on Star Wars who just, like, tells everybody in, like, a press conference, he's like, it's so crazy that he's Luke Skywalker's father, and the movie hadn't come out yet, and because there was no internet, nobody heard of it, nobody knew.
Yes. It was David Prowse, the
Wow.
guy who plays Darth Vader in the suit. He just
Right.
blurted it out like a year before it came out. Yeah, you're right. And nobody like spread it. Nobody. So anyway.
Wow.
Okay,
Those are better
so
times.
back
Just
to
for spoilers.
Spectacular. So now we cut back to the blonde asshole. Who?
Malcolm McBride.
Huh?
Yeah,
Malcolm.
McBride.
Malcolm McBride.
Yes.
And he is experimenting on the stuff that he found in the what's it called, the basement underneath the stone like thing, right, or whatever. And all of a sudden it starts growing and turning evil. Well, not turning evil, but basically this is the virus that Miles Warren was using to convert people into clones. And if this character was portrayed in a movie, he'd be portrayed by James Spader, who portrays every asshole in every 80s movie. So anyway, so then we cut over to Peter Parker is reading the journal, and
Ultron.
the writing is, I don't know about you guys, I've got the original copy, like here. It was really hard to read this writing. Like this cursive
Yes.
writing. Yeah.
Yes.
And yes, and the content was like on the creep meter. It was like up there.
Yes.
It was a little creepy.
Because he's a professor that has a crush on Gwen Stacy, one of his students. Yeah.
Right, like ooh. And
He
he's
is a
not
bad
just
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he is like, he's not one of those cool, young, hip professors. He's pretty old. He's ancient.
Right.
So it is kind of creepy that he's writing about and he's really obsessed with her.
Right.
Yeah,
So we
creepy.
see how he uses his stuff he sprays his stuff on this innocent girl. This is, did they give her name again?
Delaney?
They give it
Joyce?
Joyce. Okay. And it shows her like in this like incubation chamber, and she comes and she's like in it for a while, and then she comes out as a clone of, we'll call her a duplicate because she's not a clone, a duplicate of Gwen Stacy. So then we flash back to Spider-Man fighting his own clone. We flash back to Spider-Man fighting Carrion, and then Peter Parker's like, I gotta go. So he like puts on his Spider-Man costume, he leaves. He swings around, and just at that moment, coincidentally, he was just thinking about Carrion, who we haven't seen in 170 issues or 60, shows up right there. He's like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, wait a minute, you know me? How odd. And then, of course, it's explained that this is a new version of Carrion because we find out that this is that blonde asshole converted into a new version of Carrion. So they just start doing what you do in a Marvel comic. They start beating the crap out of each other, right? So it's like fisticuffs, throwing things, punching. Spider-Man gets knocked out, and when he wakes up, he's in another graveyard. This is where Gwen Stacy and Gwen Stacy's father, and mother, I guess, are all buried. And Carrion is hanging out on the tombstones and, like melting off to each other. And they start fighting again. They're fighting. And then so then Carrion kicks Spider-Man. He gets knocked out. And then Carrion's like walking towards Spider-Man. But then Spider-Man tricks him. He doesn't trick him. He psychs him out by revealing the gravestone that he's leaning up against. It says, here lies Dr. Miles Warren. And that's him. So he's like in this moment of confusion. Spider-Man takes advantage of it and punches him in the face. And then beats the crap out of him. Crack, boom, punch, Cthulhu. He knocks him out. He hits another tombstone. And Miles Warren's knocked out. And they don't show what happens to him. But then at the end of the scene, Spider-Man finally decides he's 100% over Gwen Stacy. He doesn't love her anymore. He's never going to think about her again. The end. And she comes back 3 years later. Anyway, okay, so that's the end of that story. And I don't know what to say about it. I mean, usually Spectacular is my favorite. I personally found this one, I was really looking forward to rereading it. But the whole backstory makes this so convoluted that I do like it, but I think compared to other Spectaculars, it's not as good. Josh, what did you think? Josh, are you still with us?
Yes, I didn't like it. I don't know. I really do not like the structure in which that Spectacular tells their stories. I don't always think that the stories that they're telling is bad. I just think that they tell it in a really awful way. I don't like this, like, getting little bits and parts of a story in such a small, like a comic book issue is such a small thing to begin with. You have to be like really precise with how you're going to tell the story. And if you're dividing that up into stories that are going to be spread out for like a really long time or that don't really have anything to do with each other, it gets really confusing when you see them in succession, especially I would assume for somebody jumping in for the first time, not necessarily knowing. Maybe Lisa could speak more to that, but I just like the Lobos thing is like, who cares? What does this have to do with anything that's happening with Carrion and the clones? There's another thing that comes up. Tombstone's like trial.
Yeah.
Like none of it clicks. None of it feels like it's supposed to belong together. And I think it takes away from the story that they're trying to tell, like the main story, because we're kind of left trying to put these pieces together, like what is going on, why are these things happening, and then the main story that they're trying to tell is like, remember this guy that from before? We'll do a flashback so you remember. Anyways, he's here, but he's badder, and Spidey's gonna punch him, and then that's it. Like it doesn't lead to anything. Nothing happens in this.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Lex Luthor, what do you think?
I liked it.
Woo!
Here's the thing about Spider-Man and clones. I love that shit. Give me all that shit. Look, I know I am infamous for liking bad garbage. But anytime there's clones of Spider-Man, I love the Jackal. I love the retcons. I think it's funny and stupid. And I think it's great because people get so mad about it. Just rewrite everything. Forget it. It's fine. Like, it doesn't matter. Oh, it's not actually Gwen Stacy's clone this time. Oh, but actually it is Gwen Stacy's clone this time. And also, she's married to a guy who's a clone of Miles Warren, named Warren Miles. It's all stupid, and I think it's so fun
awesome. Anyway,
to read.
But
I liked it.
But yeah,
I agree with Josh though about I hate the structure of Spectacular. I hate that there's 6 stories going on at once. I don't give 2 shits about what's going on with Robbie right now. Or at Lobo, or Gloria.
But we don't see any of what you've said, right?
No, this stuff happens way later.
Okay.
This is just the introduction of, like,
right,
the reintroduction of the Jackal,
because, like, I remember really liking the Clone Saga. I really like Ben Reilly. Love the Scarlet Spider. But, like, this didn't give me any of that flavor. This was just, like...
That's fair, though, because this is not the Clone Saga. This is years before the Clone Saga. Yeah.
But this is them reintroducing Miles Warren into the universe again. Be like, oh, well, Carrion's back.
Right.
So,
right.
And then, like, the High Evolutionary's here. And then I love that Carrion's really overpowered.
Yeah, he's
got telepathy, and he can fly. And he just doesn't use it at all.
He just punches.
He just punches, and he throws, like, pink dust in Peter's face.
Yeah, like
what was that pink dust? Is that something we've seen before, or is that a new weapon?
He has, like, this degenerative touch where he just decays matter, and I think the pink dust can just eat away at organic matter.
Okay, got it.
Why is it pink? I don't know.
Don't ask questions. I don't, because we have so much pink ink.
Yeah, it just feels like there's no like he doesn't have anything to do in the story. He's just like a bad guy that shows up. That's why it doesn't work for me. There's nothing that he's out trying to do. He just runs into Spider-Man and he's like, oh, you know what? I think maybe I'll punch Spider-Man now. Like there's nothing, you know what I mean? So
I just love the flimsy backstory. Like, I didn't realize that Malcolm McBride's backstory was just Peter was rude to him once. Because he was rude to Peter once. He's like, well, now I'm going to be the second Carrion for the next 12 years. And I love that. That's what I love about comic books. He's Carrion for a while now.
Really?
Right?
I didn't know that. Okay. Lisa, what's your impression of this issue?
It's just dumb and I like it.
Yeah, well, my one of my little comments here was like, of the three, I was the most confused with this one because of the backstories. But I did appreciate how occasionally the writer would include on a panel in the lower right-hand corner, for that backstory, see issue number 149, for example. I mean, I wasn't that invested in the story that I actually went back and I was like, I'll just go with the flow here. But I kind of liked that whole prior to this one, very different plots. And this one, all of a sudden we get into the scientific world, which I think would appeal to a whole other crowd of people. And at the beginning, when he finds the notebook, at first, it's kind of a joke. He's like, he takes out the notebook and he's like, oh, The Secrets of Life and Death by Victor von Frankenstein. And I was like, oh, because that's a great novel. And I'm like, oh, well, where's this going? And then he's like, yeah, no, but it's something almost as good. So I think right there, he's setting it up to be kind of the science fiction, weird experiments going wrong. And I kind of liked that part of it, that whole spin. So I thought that was really good. But then again, there are so many different subplots and I don't have the background knowledge to weave them all together. So I was kind of like, yeah, so probably not my favorite of what we read this week. But I mean, the potential's there. Give me a bit of time to figure things out and who knows? I mean, my opinion is very biased because I don't have that history,
Okay.
But I see the appeal. I see the appeal
too. And here's the thing is, even though it's confusing and the structure is all over the place, I still do like this issue. And one of the reasons I like it is because I love the art so much. Let's talk about the art very quickly. Without giving any context, what was your impression of the art on this issue, Lisa?
Like when we're talking about villains and what I would envision, how I would envision a villain, like if you look at Carrion here, that's what I'm talking about with this villain, right? He's almost... Even his color is as though he's glowing some strange radioactive matter, like that light yellow. So I like the artwork in this one. I think it's very like dark and dreary and like the villains look like the villains. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I like it. I like the artwork.
Yeah, so this guy, Sal Buscema's been around since the 60s. So he's kind of like an old school Marvel artist, more traditional. He did change his style around this time. So like the angular lines are kind of like a newer development or whatever. But I'm a huge fan of his art. And one thing about him is that it's, to me, very easy to follow the story. Even though the structure of the story is very all over the place, it's always very clear what's going on. Whereas I think with the Amazing Spider-Man that we talked about, there's a few parts in the story where all of us were like, wait, who's that? Why are they there? What are they doing? Whereas this, I never found that. Like, I really like the storytelling in this one. So I could read it just for the art, actually. But yeah, the story is all over the place, definitely.
Yeah. But on, I think the digital page 22, where you see, I think Spider-Man throws Carrion. I think that's that panel. There's pink in the background. And there's like this element of perspective that I think is really effective, where you see Spider-Man way back and he throws him so far, it's just like, look at that distance. And you see kind of like the open mouth and, the horror on Carrion's face.
Okay, I gotta say, this is funny because that's not a throw. That is a Kirby punch that Sal Buscema exaggerated. He's famous for that. The punch where the guy goes flying so far that, that's what that is right there. It's ridiculous, but it's awesome.
So one question I had, when they get into the graveyard, it's mentioned that it's a dream. It says, like, in the dream, he wakes in a graveyard. Storm, lightning, scores the night, etc., etc. But it's not a dream.
I assumed that was a Frankenstein quote.
Yeah.
And they were mirroring...
Is it?
That's what I had assumed reading it, was that it was like lines from the Frankenstein novel.
Okay, I'll look it up. Let's see here, folks. Our listeners are waiting on bated breath. Did I tell you this was live, Lisa? No, I'm just kidding. It's not live.
Yeah.
In the dream, he wakes in a graveyard. In the dream, he wakes in a graveyard. Nothing comes
Yeah.
up.
Nothing. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well.
so that's why I was like, but it's not a dream, right? It's not a dream. Because he gets, like, he passes out, he hits his head, Spidey passes out, and then it says in the dream, or he wakes up in a graveyard. So.
Here's the thing is, at this point in his career, Gerry Conway, I think he'd done some television, and he has this weird habit of, like, he'll insert right into the story, like, fade out, interlude 1, interlude 2, and it's almost like he's taking these conventions of screenwriting and theater and putting them right into the comic book. It's possible that that's like a weird attempt at narration that doesn't quite work. I don't know.
And then later on in that panel that we were just talking about, it says, and when the dream dies, when the nightmare is over, reality is all you've got left. So I don't know. They wanted to make that clever little,
right,
juxtaposition of dreaming or your worst nightmare versus reality kind of thing. But yeah, that was interesting.
Okay, does anyone think that he's done with Gwen Stacy?
No, of course not. He says that every time. Every time Gwen Stacy's is like, I'm finally over.
I'm not read ahead. I'm just very aware of where Spider-Man goes from this point because I've read all the 90s comics.
Well, that's what I mean. You've read ahead. I don't mean you've read next week. I mean you've read the next 20 years.
Yeah, dude, I don't read it. I read these today. Like,
even looking at the past, every time Gwen has come up, he's like, I'm finally over Gwen. We just had an issue where, like, she comes back and then he's looking at all the photographs and MJ's like, I know that you love her. I understand if you want to leave. And then by the end, he's like, no, I'm finally over Gwen.
Yeah, not quite.
It just happens every time she's here.
You're not over her.
No. So
mostly because she died in your arms, and that's pretty traumatic. Maybe therapy.
Yeah, that could work.
So I know that Becca went over some of this, but I'll just quickly summarize. It is later revealed in Scarlet Spider Unlimited #1 that this whole story was a deception created by the High Evolutionary to cover up the secrets of cloning. Okay.
Yeah, because Miles Warren used to work for the High Evolutionary, so it turns out he's not dead. That's the whole right. And so the High Evolutionary plants a fake journal, along with the new, the second strain of the Carrion virus, right? Mm-hmm. So none of this matters. Isn't that great?
Love it.
That's so fun.
It is revealed in Amazing Spider-Man number 399 that Miles traded places with a clone in order to cheat death. He has been in hiding since and will resurface in Amazing Spider-Man number 399. But here's the thing, though. You watch Coronation Street. I'm sure that there's all kinds of twists and turns with twins and comas and stuff, right?
Absolutely. In this week's episode, there's this long lost relative who shows up who moved to Canada. And now he's back on the street with this weird accent that is not really Canadian, but who might have judged? So you're constantly getting characters like that, right? Like any soap opera.
There you go. And that's why we love it, right? Just like a soap opera.
How many Jackal clones are there? I know there's 3 that I can think of. Including the regular guy, the original guy. And then there's at least 3.
Well, I mean, if we go to marvelfandom.com, we look at Carrion. We have Malcolm McBride, we have Miles Warren clone, we have William Allen.
Who's that?
I don't know. Another clone. And then we have Carrion Crow. Okay, William Allen... Oh, this is confusing. William Allen... Sorry. Oh, so this guy, William Allen, was given the Jackal's memories. He first appeared in Spider-Man Dead Man's Hand #1.
I think you get the Jackal's memories when you get infected by the Carrion virus, because that seems to be what's happening to Malcolm, right?
Yeah.
At a specific point in time, right? Because he seems to think Peter's still a kid. Mm-hmm. Even though it's been 6 years. Or however long in continuity.
This is the kind of stuff we worry about.
Yeah. I just want to know.
Well, while you're doing that research, let's give this a number grade. Even though it was confusing as F, I'm going to give this one, I still give it a 6.5 because I love the art so much. It's not really a great story, but I still enjoy what happened, and I still got to read it to find out what's happening to Spidey. So 6.5. Josh, what do you give it?
Oh, man. I'll give it like a 5.
Ooh.
I think. I just didn't like the side stories. I didn't like the main story. I like the visual aspect of it. I'm actually just realizing now that like Carrion is also kind of looks like the Goblin, which is really interesting that he's kind of involved with Gwen, like bringing her back, because he almost looks like a mutated opposite version of the Green Goblin. So the fact that he's like bringing her back to life after he was the one who killed her is kind of interesting. Right. But I don't know. Yeah, 5.
Could have been planned. Okay, Bex Luthor, what do you give it out of 10?
It's got the same color scheme going on, eh? Green and like purpley.
Yeah, he's got like the purple hood and everything. The pointy boots.
I'm gonna give it 7 clones out of 10.
Yeah, see? That's what I'm talking about. Nice. Lisa, what do you give it out of 10?
Yeah, I think of the 3, I would give this one the lowest just because I don't have the history. I don't know the backstory. However, there were some great insults in here that I enjoyed.
Oh,
what did I say? I gave
us.
it 6? A 6? Yeah. So there's a couple times where Spidey, I think, was talking to Carrion, and he was like, he called him graveyard breath. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And he also called him like mold breath. I'm like, absolutely. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I thought that was really good. I like the artwork as well. I like the color scheme. I like that light purple with the light green. And yeah, so I give it a 6.
6? Yeah. Okay.
6. And
That's
again,
fair.
Completely biased because I don't have the background history.
That's okay. We do, and we still don't understand what's going on, so it's fair. Yeah.
Enjoy not having that in your head.
Yeah.
Also, what's it like to like have friends?
Side note. Anyway,
there's only 2 types of people. There's the types of people that have friends, and the types of people who know what the hell's going on in the Clone Saga. Okay.
Yeah, you know, like when in a comic they actually have like the equivalent of footnotes to go find like other, you know, issues to figure out what's happening. You know, it's complicated. But in that complexity, that's kind of cool because a lot of people will think, oh yeah, comic books, right? Whatever. But there is that complexity. If you, as much time as you want to invest in them, you can keep going and really, you know, dive deep into this, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I like that aspect of it.
It's like a double-edged sword, I find. I really like that side of comics, and it's really fun how they're like all interconnected and they kind of lead from one to the other, and it really feels like it's all part of the same world and these things are happening together. But also it can be convoluted and a lot sometimes,
right,
as you see in something like this, where it just like kind of makes the story confusing. But
yeah,
that's kind of the charm of it too at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, guess what, folks? Unfortunately, we have to wrap this episode up. It's been a great episode. It's been a long one.
Yeah.
And it's been all very informative. Lisa, I want to thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
I hope it was everything you thought it would be.
And more.
Awesome. And we appreciate your annotations, and we're all going to be sure to initiate your whole system into every episode of the Spidercast.
Oh man, you make me seem so much more nerdy than what I really am.
Did you not just spend the last 2 hours talking to us and you feel like the nerdy one? Come on.
Anyway.
Yeah,
exactly.
You're amongst good company here.
Good.
We're all dweebs for something.
Nice.
At least your skill is helpful.
There we go.
So there you go. Yeah, we're not contributing anything important to society, that's for sure. But anyway, thank you for joining us, Bex Luthor.
I mean, yep, you're welcome.
It's
also, one more fun fact. Did you know that Santa Claus is considered an Omega level mutant? That's fun.
Oh my god.
Learn something new every day.
I love that.
I don't know the names of half of my cousins. Anyway, okay. It's too bad G.I. Jolie could not join us, but she should be with us next week.
Yeah, she would have loved this.
And Joshua Mervell, you can take it from here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. It really helps when you leave us reviews or leave comments on our things. You can find us at the Comic Book Syndicate pretty much anywhere. That's YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, comicbooksyndicate.com. Check us out there. All of our podcasts are posted there, or anywhere else you can find podcasts. Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, whatever you use, we're there. Let us know what you guys think about the issues we're talking about and the podcast itself. We want to keep that conversation going. So
that's right. So until next Monday, see you later.